This is a recording for the CUPHAT project. My name is Matthew O'Brien. Today is the 10th of August 2023 and I have here with me Michael O'Toole. Thank you very much, Michael. Can you confirm for the recorder that you're happy to take part in this project?
Yes.
Thank you. And could you just spell your name for the recorder, please?
Michael.
Perfect, thank you very much. So Michael, could you tell me a little bit about your early life? When and where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in June 1957 in Rathangan, about half a mile from where I now live. I was the youngest of six. Thomas and Annie was my mother, our father and mother, and we were born on a small mixed farm. My brother was the oldest and he was farming at home, and I was the youngest, and I had four sisters in between. I went to Archaeological school, and then I went from there to Hacketstown Vocational School and did 3 years there, junior cert and inter cert at that time, and that's all they did in Hacketstown at the time. And to do the leaving cert I went to Tulla Vocational School in County Carlow. I did the exam in leaving cert year for a trainee technician with the P&T that time and was successful, and I joined the P&T in 1975 and I retired in 2017. So I was putting my whole life in P&T, Telecom Airn and eventually Air. I married here in 1984 and built a house here, and I started travelling to Dublin in 1984 when I built here. I lived in Dublin for a few years until we got married, and I suppose I was one of the first people to start travelling to Dublin every day for work. Nearly everybody around here does it now, or a lot of people do, but it wasn't so common that time. And I travelled for a few years on my own, and then another neighbour was in P&T, and he come back and got married here, Pat Keogh, you probably know him, and we travelled together for years then to Dublin. So I was married then in 84, and we had two children, Elaine and Thomas, and we now have 3 grandchildren. So we've gone full circle. I'm retired and Margaret is retired, so we're busy grandparents, maybe you could say.
And you mentioned you grew up on a mixed farm. What are some of your kind of earliest, maybe childhood memories of the farm, or are there any?
You had great times. You mightn't necessarily have liked the work, but there were great times because there was always people around the place. The haymaking, there'd be people in the harvesting, there'd be people in the tinning of the turnips in the spring, and the picking of the potatoes. Trashings were a huge occasion, and there was always so much fun and crack going on and different characters coming in, and it was so totally different now to the farm. And now a farmer very seldom sees anyone now. It's one of the loneliest occupations at the moment, but that time, and there was always devilment going on, and there'd be lads in and they'd be up to some sort of mischief, and everybody then come in for the dinner in the daytime, and mountains of potatoes and cabbage and bacon. You'd have killed the pig, and this bacon would be cut up, and just the crack around the table, fellas telling yarns and lies and reminiscences, and fantastic times. Great place to grow up, and you learned a lot too. It was, as I say, was always something to do, and whether it was carrying water to stock in the house or cleaning out the house, or when you got a bit older, if you could get up to drive a tractor. The big vehicle, or the most useful tractor in the country at the time, was the Ferguson 20, the little grey mare, and that's where I started my driving experience. And it was such a pleasure to get up in the little grey mare, no cab, no nothing, be going down the fields on a nice fine day, and just the heat hitting you in the face. It was great times. And apart from people coming to work at the farm, and there was always people passing the road, people going to the shop, like everybody was walking. So people might have come from Ballykilmurray, a couple of miles down the road, a woman come shopping during the day and a couple of children with her, and they'd call in and maybe get a cup of tea, and there'd be chat and talk. The kettle was always on the fire, or on the cooker as it was then, and like there was people coming continuously, whether they were working or passing the road, or you'd be out in the yard and someone would come and there'd be a conversation struck up. It was very hard to get anything done. And then of course you had the travellers, the tramps as we used to call them that time. Men of the road used to call regularly. There was 3 or 4 used to call at home regularly. They could call in mostly in the evening time or night, and they were sort of welcome because they had news. They could have come from God knows where, but they'd have news. Now they'd have news whether it was good news or bad news or lies or what, but people sort of welcomed and meaning where you had been and what was the farmers doing down around Aughrim or Rathnew, and they would have travelled huge distances. So they'd come in and they'd get a huge big mug of tea and a couple of big slices of bread, and they'd head then out to one of the sheds and they'd bed down for the night, and they'd be up the next morning then, and there was a stream at the far side of the road, and go out and wash there, come in and get the breakfast, and they'd be gone on. And some of them latter times they didn't really work, and they said one of the commandments or one of the rules of the tramp was that he never slept in a house where there was implements or tools. He couldn't sleep where there was working tools, like it was a myth, like. But no, it was an education, like, and all those fellas brought something to the place, like. Some of them were alcoholic, and one fella, Alec the tailor, they used to call him, used to drink mental aid spirits. So you can imagine the constitution he had, like. But we're all welcomed and respected, and there was one little fella who used to come in, and he never spoke much. And he'd always, if there was a newspaper in the house, he'd get the newspaper and he'd be reading it. But he was at home one evening, I think it was a Saturday evening, and this would be going back now to the mid-60s maybe, and there was something going on around Kilkenny at the time. There was someone burning down hay sheds, and the talk was how the terrible thing, because the farmer losing a hay shed that time was like a tragedy, and they were talking about why someone would do this and how they would do it, and they thought this fella was lighting a candle and letting the candle burn down, and then when the candle burned down and set fire to the hay. It was a huge discussion, everyone had an opinion on it, and the little tramp was saying nothing. And my mother said, Asher, someone that does that has to be mad. And the little fella put up and he says, those who are mad harm themselves, those who are bad harm others. And that's all he said, like. But I never forgot. And everyone sort of sat back and said, because he had very seldom spoke, like, but he'd been listening obviously what was going on, and this, but I'd say he was an educated man, and this was, he was probably fed up listening to us talking about it, and then this fellow was mad, and this is why I come out with, those who are mad harm themselves, those who are bad harm others. So like that in itself was an education that evening, like. And it was always regular workers at home who come every day, and then, as I say, we made hay with neighbours. We had machinery bought between us, and they'd come down, and then we'd go to their house for the hay making. Then the draw needed the hay, used to draw the hay in with the little Ferguson 20 and the buck rake, a great job. And well, it was only maybe, I suppose, 12, 14 years of age maybe when you'd start doing that job, like. And that was much better than trying to pitch it in the haggart, like, on a warm day. Pitching hay around the haggart was an awful job. But farming changed so much, then machinery started getting bigger, silage started to be made. That was a huge change around for farmers. And when silage started to be made around the country, of course, like everything, it couldn't work. How could it possibly work that you brought in green wet grass and made it into a pile and expected it to feed stock? Like, it'd have to rot. You'd only have dung. And of course then one farmer, McGrath man over in Talbotstown, was one of the first around here to make silage, and of course there was no pick-up hitches on tractors or anything. So I know the fellow who worked there, he was only a young fellow at the time, And when they started making the silage, they had a jack, and they used to have to jack the trailer up off the hitch of the tractor, to change trailers in the field. And of course the field would be damp and the jack would sink and all this, but like the invention of the pickup hitch, like it was like such an advantage, like. And the little Ferguson 20 we got a pickup hitch for it, and that was a huge advancement, like. But even the mowing machine, like my father bought a mowing machine for the Ferguson 20 back in the 50s, and people come to see this mowing machine, like they couldn't understand how this mowing machine worked on the back of a tractor, like. Then of course the binder come and all that, but then as I said, the silage was the big change, and of course people were reluctant to start making silage until it just wouldn't work, like, because they were so used to making the hay, drying the hay, pitching the hay, bringing it in, the whole rigmarole with that. And then of course the binders come in for cutting the barley and oats, and of course the binders around here were always second hand or third hand, and they never worked properly. And you'd be cutting away a grand and the sheaves be coming out. The next thing, the knotter, this knotter would stop working and it'd start throwing out loose sheaves, and they'd have to get down and try and get this knotter to work. It was just, the machinery was worn out, like, before someone here would have had a few pounds to buy it, like. And then of course the combine harvester was a whole different ball game, but they all did away with the big groups of people coming to work together, the metals as they call it, like. The thrashings were ended. The haymaking in effect was ended. You had a few lads for a couple of days and it was all done, and things started to change, like with modernisation. And then of course dairying started. In my time we milked the cows by hand, put the milk in the creamery can, and the man come to collect it at the milk stand and bring it back to skim milk the next day. And it was a great money spinner, like you had a regular income, and which was, a great hassle at that time to have any sort of regular money coming in, because like up to that you'd be waiting to sell a few cattle or sell a pig or sell something or other. But when you had the milk was regular coming in every month, and it made the big changes. Then farmers expanded and got into more cows, and milk machines come in, and the bulk tanker and all that. But like even in the 70s when farmers were milking around here, they were still putting the milk in the cans. And from up around Sleeray and Dream and up there was a big milk stand up in the village, and the fella could come down with 20 maybe creamery cans and lift them up on the milk stand, and then the lorry would come and take them before bulk tanks, like. And it was all heavy work, like you were lifting a can there with 10 gallons of milk in it up on the milk stand. It was heavy work. And then of course the fella coming with the lorry had to lift them up, and he would have a deck and he'd have to lift them up on the deck. And it was all hard work, like. Even fellas were strong in body anyway, about mind, but people were just stronger, and from just the hard work, like. So but it's totally changed. Like we that time you knew everybody in the country, you knew every child in the house, you knew every old person, you knew everyone. There wouldn't be anyone in the country now. There's people within a stone's throw here, and I wouldn't know them, and I wouldn't very seldom see them, because just like I was, they're driving to Dublin or driving somewhere to work, and they don't have time to socialise. The pub is closed now, but if people are out early in the morning, they're not going to be socialising much. So it takes a generation for people when they move into an area until they have kids, and the kids start going to school and they start mingling with other parents, that they sort of integrate into the area. But you don't have the same integration that you would have had in olden times, like, because a person was born here and bred here, and well, a lot of people emigrated, but the people who stayed, like, this place was ingrained in them. I suppose the thing about the 50s and 60s was the amount of emigration that occurred, like. And my memory in my younger days was people coming back during the summer on holidays from England mostly. Most of them went to England. If you went to America at that time, you wouldn't be back too often, but fellas would come back every few years from England. There would have been, there was big families, and they would all have just emigrated. And I always remember coming back in. Some of them would have worked at home as young lads on the farm. They'd come back to see my mother and father, and they used to always say, England is great, but it's not home. I always remember that from being a child. Like, there was sadness about it. They'd come in and they'd have the suit on, and everything looked great, and we're doing grand, but like, it's not home. But most of them never came back. Like, they got married and settled down in England, and that was it. Like, and you see, in the 50s and 60s, the forestry had come in, and small farms were vacated up in the hills. People just left, and then they were planted, and that was the end of it. Like, if a farm is planted by trees, well, there's no retrieving it. Like, so all the forestry up around the hills there, they would have been all small farms, small holdings with families in them. And I suppose it was just too hard at the time to make a living, and some of them just went out and locked the door behind them because the land was worth nothing. The forestry would have got land for the next thing to nothing. Like, but I suppose it depends on how you look at forestry. It created employment at the time, and it was a good employer. Like, at the time, everything was done by hand too. All those trees were planted by hand, and a lot of people around got work in it. But then as things progressed and the trees got up, the jobs got fewer, and they used to maintain fences and all like that. But when the forestries got mature, that wasn't so important. I suppose wood fab developed from the forestry down in Auckland. But I was sad to see small homesteads planted. Like, that was the end of it, and the little houses just disappeared into the forestry, and people around, I think, felt it was sad, and but as I say, I did employ people at the time, and there was lots of stories told about the fellas on the forestry and the making of the tea. Of course, they had to make tea. And every fella on the forestry, you couldn't be seen to not turn up without tea. You had to hold your own, like. And everybody could bring tea, and everybody would throw the tea into the pot. So by the time there was about 4 lads working together, there could be half a pound of tea in the pot. And you could trap mice on it, like. And they said the strong tea on the forestry had people's stomachs, that they all had stomach trouble in their times, whether that was true or not. But again, there was great characters on the forestry, and there'd be stories coming back about what Tom had said on the forestry, and it'd be all lies mostly, like, but it's generated conversation. Like, it'd all be rehearsed in the pub, in the 2 pubs that time, at night or at the weekends, like.
And I might come back to some of those stories a little bit later on.
I'm going a bit fast, man.
What was the kind of social and community life like then in the area when you were growing up? It was strong, was it?
Yeah. Well, we were lucky. We formed a Macra in the Tuha club at the time in the early 70s. Father Gann was the curate in Hackettstown, and he was a very active man, and he formed Macra and Tuha clubs in the 4 areas of the parish. The parish comprises Ratangan, Kilmore Church, Knockanana, Askanigapp and Hackettstown. And he formed youth clubs, or Macra and Tuha clubs at the time, in each area. And it was a godsend because we used the hall. Now the hall is not anything like it was now, but we had the hall, like. And when I look back on it, we were given free rein with the hall, like. There was a hall committee, but no one ever said you can't do this, you can't do that. We had 24-hour soccer marathons in it, all sorts of activity. No one ever come in and said you can't do that. Like, we decided to paint it one time, and we just went and painted it, like, and we had free rein, which was great at the time. And a lot of the people who were involved in that club are sort of still around and involved in the community council now and the history club, and we stayed involved all the time, like. But the Macra na Tuha sort of trained us in having a group, and I mean, you had question time and public speaking, and we did drama, plays. Father Gann wrote a play one time himself, and each area did an act. It was a 3-act play, and each Machran Tuatha club did an act. I think we did the first act, Knockananna might have done the second act, and Haggstown the third act. And then we put it on in the hall in Knockananna on the night, like huge hall packed, like, because the whole parish was at, like. And one of the early years we entered the Citizenship Award. I think it still runs for Machra, whatever they call it now, for Oiga. But the ESB sponsored it that time, and it was called the Citizenship Award. And the idea was that you put a project forward to show how your club benefited the community. And this was about 1972 or 3, and you sent your project forward, and then there was so many picked, and there was a weekend in Gormanstown College in County Meath, and then you went with your project and you presented it to an interview committee, like. And again, you had to, it was an interview, I was on an interview and a girl with me, Marie Heffernan, and you presented your whole project and how this was, how it was working and how it benefited the community and all like that. And then on the last night, you had to put on 15 or 20 minutes entertainment. And again, Father Gann wrote a sketch for it. And myself and Mick Kavanagh put on this sketch. Again, Gormanstown was, to us, it was massive, like. And see, at the start of the weekend, just the representatives that were going to be interviewed went up to Gormanstown. But on the final night, then the whole club come up, like, the whole area come up. Buses, like, would come in. And again, it was the same for every club there, like. Now, Merview in Galway beat us. We got second place. Merview in Galway beat us. But I know you're going to ask me what our project was. And there's a book in that in itself. Father Gann come up with the idea at the time. Well, I don't know where he got it, but that he was going to breed rabbits. And they were broiler rabbits. And these rabbits were going to be huge in restaurants. Now, they were a white rabbit. A big lump of a rabbit, like. And the idea was that these were going to replace chicken on the menu in restaurants and hotels all over the country. And we got some rabbits, and I had some at home. I could have had maybe 20 rabbits, and some of the rest of them had rabbits in an outhouse or a shed or something like that. And we had to make the cages. He bought some of it out the back still, some square netting, something like netting wire, and you had to make the cages and staple them together and make a roof on it. The cage would have been about 2 foot square, but you had to have a lid on it to get the rabbit in and out. You had to have a drinker, you had to have a water system, and you could get all this stuff. A pipe went right through them, and there was little nipples on the pipe that the rabbits could use. Then you had the feeders on the front of them for feeding them their nuts. There was special nuts and all for them. And there was a shed at home, and myself and my father made up these cages, and we got these rabbits. And we went then and presented these rabbits were going to multiply at the rate of knots, and there was going to be thousands of rabbits around the area, and this was going to be an industry, like. You know, we could make a living out of this at home in the shed. And but we had facts and figures, and actually I think there's literature about it around somewhere still, and the trophy we got is still somewhere. But and we brought rabbits. We actually brought live rabbits to the thing, like, and had them in cages, like, to show the judges. And these rabbits were up there and doing what rabbits do and shitting around the place. But we had to look after them for the whole weekend, like, that they wouldn't, nothing had happened to them and all that. So it caused consternation, like, because it was so unusual. Like, we made, at the time, the Irish press covered it. The Irish press, of course, is gone now as well. But well, we made the pages, like, these rabbits were going to turn this place inside out, like. And I forget what Murphy's project was. Must have been more realistic than ours anyway. But on the final night, Cardinal Conway the Primate of All Ireland come to present us with our trophies and all that. Like he was, I don't know, he must have been a patron or something of Mark and Ferma, but our photographs were taken with Cardinal Conway, no one would remember him now, on the night, and he presented us with our trophies and all this. But fantastic experience, like. And well, anyway, going back to the rabbits, we were going along grand with the rabbits and we're doing grand, and you had to have a book, obviously, and you'd have to take the book and you'd have to put them into the cage, and the book would have to do what books do. And then you had to make a wooden box for the rabbit to farrow in, like. And we put the wooden box in the corner of the cage, so she would then pluck all the fur off herself and get in and wrap the little babies up in the fur, you see. And she could have 6 or 8 and everything was going grand. But when you went in to feed them or went into the house, the rabbit panicked and she ate the young. We didn't realise, you see, that this had happened. So you needed a farrowing area away from everything else for them to go in and have their young and leave them alone, like. But if you went into them when they were only little small ones, she threw them out of the cage and obviously they died. So this was a disaster. We hadn't enough accommodation to separate the pregnant rabbits from the others, like. So that's where it failed on that. Some of them survived, some of them we might have 1 or 2 out of a litter, and they were beautiful, like. And sure, we gave them away in the end. People saw them and they were lovely little pet, like. But if it had been organised better, if we'd had better accommodation, it might have worked. But I don't think I ever saw a rabbit on the menu since that. I don't think, the only place you'd see rabbits was years ago in Dublin. They'd have them hanging in the butcher stall, but I never saw a rabbit on the menu, I don't think, since. But it was a great experience. And then of course we did drama at that time. We'd have a play or some sort of entertainment every year, and you'd be going to other clubs for question times. You'd load up on a bus and you could be going over to Carlow. We were sort of affiliated with Carlow because we're on the border here. So you'd be going over to Michael or, you know, for a nice question time, public speaking and all that. And see, in the early 70s then, the students in the college were allowed to come out. And after Vatican II, where everything was opened up, and the students from the college started coming out and acting as leaders in the Machranatoga groups. We had fellas, Kiltegan had someone went to each group, you see. And because Father Gann, obviously, he set up, and then he hadn't time to be going to them all. And these lads were a godsend. And one of the first lads we had was Peter Finnegan. He was only a student at the time. He became the boss man in Hyde Park after. And we had a fellow, Michael Hoare, he was from Wexford. They'd come out for about 2 or maybe 3 years while they'd be down here just before they'd be ordained. And they would have gone to hospitals. They'd have gone to Botanass. Some of them, more of them, have gone to the Shillelagh. And you know, they were a huge asset in the area. So we had another fella then who was the longest with us, Jimmy MacDonald. He's down in the college at the moment, retired now, and he was from Clondra in Longford. And he was an amazing man. Like, he had so much patience with us, and he just loved coming out. But Jimmy went to every house in the country as well, like, apart from coming out to the Feroiga. Jimmy could show up in any house any time of the day or night on his bike, like, and he would have travelled around Taskenny Gap and all sorts of places. And everybody knew Jimmy. And he produced a play with the adults here as well. The Far Off Hills was called. He produced that with a group and did very well. They went to Coilenearan to a drama festival, and a brother of mine got an award, and they did well with this play, like. But Jimmy was out so much, everybody knew Jimmy. And when anyone would meet some of the priests inside in the college, you know, the bossmen, they'd say, "Oh, Jimmy MacDonald," and everybody knew Jimmy. Like, and Jimmy was out far more than he should have been. But when it was all right, he was coming out to the Feroiga. But when he was doing to play with the seniors, he was coming out every night of the week, like, and he didn't want to be seen to be coming out so much from the college, like, and he was going along grand, and he was incognito, and then of course the player went to Kyle Nearan and they won prizes, and there was a write up on the Wicklow People about the successful Ratangan group who had won prizes at the Kyle Nearan Drama Festival, and the play was produced by Jimmy MacDonald of St. Patrick's, and his cover was all blown. But he used to bring us to, we used to organise a bus to go to shows in Dublin. One of the big ones was Joseph and his amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Now for us to get to theatre, it was in the Gaiety. There'd be the bus, 50-seater bus, and it'd be loaded with all sorts. Now some adults would come with, like, or if there was room, if there was a few spare seats. So Jimmy had organised the tickets, and we'd head off on the bus to Dublin, like, to Joseph and his amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. And it's like, it was so fascinating to see a show like that, like, because television had come in. We only got the television in the 60s, like black and white telly, but to see a live show like that, we were only kids, like Tony Kenny, like, you can still remember them all. And he would have brought us to a few shows, but one that stands out was Joseph. And Father Gann, the first year he was there, he organised a trip to Scotland. It was 1972, and he had a lovely Fiat 128 car, and I can see it still. It was such a great car because we were used to Anglias and Prefects and our bad Cortines, and just the Fiat had just come out, and were a lovely car. And there was another fella around had a car, and he loaded up the two cars anyway, and we went to Scotland, all up around Edinburgh and all. And we went to films in Edinburgh, and one of them was Frenzy. It was a horror movie, and but we had a great time. We stayed in a hostel, and we had the full of his car and the full of this other man. Tony Sullivan was his name. He was older than us, obviously, and my sister was with. She was older, and I suppose there was only maybe 4 young people from the Ferroig. I thought they were adults, really, and we tagged along, like. But a great trip. We went up to Stranraer and got the boat across, and we did the week. We drove around, and we were coming back, and on the boat, and one of the lads, Paddock Whelan, he just lived down the road there, started getting terrible sick on the boat coming back, and it's like everything we thought, sure, after Paddock has seasickness, sure, you'll be grand, like. And geez, he kept getting sicker and sicker, and the sweat pouring out of him, and we said maybe there is something wrong with him. So he was in ferocious pain. But anyway, we got him to back to Stranraer and got him to a doctor, and of course he had an appendix. The appendix was about to burst. So we had to get him to a hospital in the north of Ireland and leave him up there and come home and go down and tell his father and mother that their son was in a hospital up in the north of Ireland. But he got the appendix fixed anyway, and he was alright. He got home in a week or so. But the things that you sort of encounter, we left him up there and that was it. And he was only a child, like, really. And sure, there was no one stayed with him, right? We all come home, told his mother, well, he's up there, and sure, they weren't too bad. He's in hospital, sure, he can't be too bad, like. And probably Father Gann went up and got him in a week's time or something, like.
And given the kind of success of the youth groups and the drama groups, do they still exist now? Yeah,
we do. We've done a play for the last 13 years. Well, we were held up with COVID there. We missed a couple of years, but we started them back in the early 2000s. We got a man called John Rossiter. He's from Dublin, and he had moved into Baltinglass, and he was doing drama in Baltinglass, and Filey Cullen was involved with the community council up there, and he was always talking about getting drama going in the hall again, and he approached John to see would he be interested in producing a play with us. So he said he would, and he come out, and the first year we just did a one-act play, because we thought, this is, people mightn't come, or we were only starting back, we hadn't done anything at drama for years, like. So we did a one-act play and a couple of sketches, and it was a huge success. So then, of course, he said, you should do a 3-act play. So we did then, and as I say, we did our 13th there this year. Do 2 weekends, Friday, Saturday and Sunday, or sometimes we spread out over 3 weekends, do Friday and Saturday. But we do 6 nights, and the hall will be packed every night, like. So that's our main money spinner for the year, our main fundraiser. We don't really raise funds any other way. So we don't make enough money on it to keep us going for the whole year, like.
And are there any other groups that exist in Ratdangan, in present day?
Well, John again runs a writers group. They meet maybe every second week or that, and they have produced a couple of booklets of their stories, like. We have dances every month. Every second Saturday of every month we have dances, waltzes, steps, all that sort of stuff. We had what they call ramblers going there very well for a few years. We used to have them every month, where people would come in and tell stories, sing songs, play music. It was a big thing before COVID. There would have been a rambler somewhere every night of the week if you wanted to go, like. A man over in Clonmore, Eddie MacDonald, started him, I don't know, I suppose it's over 20 years ago. He started it. He started him in his own house, and then he had a shed that he converted, and then they took off to be one in Tullow and to be down in Wexford. Wexford was big for them, and the same people sort of followed them around. For all people who were retired and that, and they'd have their poem and their song and they'd play music, and we used to have one of them every month, and you could have 40-50 people at them, like. And obviously, you'd have the tea, and then there'd be a music session after. You could have 8 or 10 musicians, and they'd play away for as long as they liked. Now, again, since COVID, people have fallen off. People have sort of got out of the habit of going out, and a lot of those people have got old, and some of them got sick during COVID. But we try and have one every 3 months, and just to keep it going, like. A lot of the others have fallen away, but we said rather than let it go all together, that we try one every 3 months and see would it keep going. So we had the pantry going then there before COVID. That was a great asset, the coffee shop, like, in the hall, and that was going really well. Now we opened every day of the week for half a day at the start. It was all voluntary, and we had some CE workers. Then we got 2 CE workers, which were a great help. And of course it shut down then during COVID, and we never got going back again. We're doing again like the Ramblers. We're sort of doing a pop-up pantry now every few months, like, and we'd have sort of a trade fair, people coming to sell goods, crafts and that type of thing, and we just open it up for the 3 months or every 3 months or so, just to keep it going, like. But it would be great to keep it going. Now Kiltegan had one as well, and the same thing happened. It's very hard to keep it going on a voluntary basis all the time. And but it was a huge asset, like. It was brilliant. And we opened from about 9 until 1 or thereabouts, 7 days. And then we sort of cut back to 5, and then we sort of opened for the weekends. But it was absolutely brilliant, like. And a lot of cyclists used to use it on the Sunday. There'd be cyclists from Blessington, Cogs is their names. They'd be doing the circuit down from Blessington down to Glendalough, back to Lara, Glenmalure. They'd come this way in the circuit, like, and they'd always drop in on a Sunday morning. Or the Tulla group might be out Slaney riders. We used to get a lot of cyclists like that. Sometimes, if there was a big group coming, they'd tell you, right, we're going to have 20 lads there Sunday, like. And obviously you'd have extra help in, but it was just so hard to keep it going, like, on that sort of basis. The girl that was doing manager, she just got burned out really, and a few of them that were sort of trying to keep it going, So, but everything is up there still. We have the coffee makers, we have everything there. If we might get around to doing it again sometime, you know. But see, after the pub closing and the post office closing, there was nothing in Rectangle. Like we did a study, what's over 10 years ago now. You know, an organised study with Conor Leary down in Kiltegan, where he come and met us. Well, it went on for months, like what was in the area, what was needed in the area, what we should be doing as a community council. And one of the things that we sent out a survey to every house in the area. We've about 100 and odd houses. So we sent out a survey like to every house to know what was needed in the area. And the whole thing was, for want of a better word, was a hub, a centre where people could gather, like. So we got back all the information, and at the time there was a group down in Waterford had set up that type of system, and it was going really well. So she's a love. We went down and saw how it worked and all, and she set it up on the same basis, and that's how that started. It come from a study group within the community council, like trying to find out what was needed. At that time then as well, we set up the playground. There's a playground up there beside the little field, just up there at the houses, and we got money from Wicklow County Council for the equipment and all that's up there. I was a bog really, but we reclaimed it, and there's a little field at the back of the houses where they can play hurling and football, and then the playground is beside it, like slides, the usual things, and that has been very successful now. It's used very well, like it was opened officially there a few years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago maybe. Michael Ring actually come up because he was giving money that time into rural groups, and we benefit from that now. They bought all the equipment. We had the site and they provided the equipment, and that come out with the study group as well. So we're in the process now of having, well, it's over 10 years, so we're trying to do a similar study now again, see, you know, what's needed, because 10 years ago the pub was still there, and since that's gone, so I don't know whether anything will come out of it, but there's a good group there, like in the community council, and you know, we meet every month, and we organise the tidy towns, litter picks, whatever's done around the area, like comes through the community council, like, and Paul O'Toole is the chairman, and does tremendous work. Like, we look after the graveyard up there. We bought a more, like, the council should do it, but you know they don't really, so we said we do it. But again, we were changing our more there recently, and the council gave us money towards it. So if you're doing something, like, you will be supported, like.
And tell me a little bit about you mentioned earlier, the Rathdangin history group.
Yeah, it was like everything, we talked about it for years and years about compiling a history, because the place is hugely historical, like, and like everything, we left it too late. Well, we had to do it now because there was a few fellas left who had all the history in their heads, like. Now, several people around who had lived all their lives in the area and had history just at their fingertips had unfortunately passed away, and we said, right, if we don't do it now, it's just definitely going to be too late. We were too late as we're doing, but we're better late than never. And as I say, we had a few fellas around who had a huge interest and the knowledge, and we sort of downloaded their knowledge and compiled it into a book. Sean Byrne was very interested in history. Sean was the son of A.O. Vrenz, president of the GA, and he's a teacher he's retired now as well. He's a teacher in Newbridge, but always had a huge interest in the area, and his mother would have had she would have written down an awful lot of stuff from older people in the area at the time. She was foreseen enough to be able to recognise these people. All people in the area had a huge amount of information, like, and she wrote an awful lot of stuff down over the years just for her own information, like, maybe hoping that someday it might be documented. So Sean was a huge driver in that, and he's still driving the history group, like. So we set up a subcommittee of the community council to do it, like, and like we sat down originally and right, how do we go about this, like, and what do we need to cover and what's of interest, and try to get some sort of focus that, right, we can't be scattered, like, we'll have to say focus on maybe 10 topics or 10 issues or 10 something, and try and focus on them, like. Now it changed as we went along, like, but the main thing was to document, say, the history of the village, like going back not too long ago, like, there was 3 pubs in the village. Well, going back to the early 1900s, you had a barracks, an RIC barracks, and a courthouse. You had a national school just beside the barracks up there, Church of Ireland National School. You had 3 pubs. You would have had at least 3 grocery shops, a post office, and the post office was a post office, a grocery shop, and a hardware. The pub, the present pub there now, was a pub and a drapery shop. You could buy your shirts, your boots, your working clothes. The front area on the street was a drapery shop. Like. You would have had 2 blacksmiths. There would have been a cobbler. There was a fella made nails. So the place was a hive of industry. Like, you can imagine, like, the school there full with maybe 40 or 50 youngsters, like, the racket they'd make in the daytime, just the atmosphere of a school, like, in the place. But you can trace the demise of the village back to the early 1900s, like. The RIC barracks closed down. They were withdrawn in the early 1900s, and then they went to Kiltegan, and then that progressed. Kiltegan was closed, and they went to Baltinlass, and you can see it. And then obviously when the courthouse, or when the barracks closed, the courthouse closed. Like, the courthouse was just across there was a black hole and all in it. It was a proper barracks, like. You could be locked up in the black hole in it, like. And then obviously the blacksmiths failed, like. I remember the last blacksmith, he died a few years ago. Bill Doyle was the last blacksmith, like, who worked in it. And the last work he did would have been maybe the early 60s. He shod a wheel. There was a shoe and lock attached to the forge where they actually shod the wheel, put the band around the wheel. And my brother remembers the last wheel being shod for an ass's cart for our neighbour up there, Gerald O'Toole, like. And it was the last work in the forge on the shoe and stone. The shoe and stone is still up there, like, where they put the wheel down and put the rim around. It was marvellous work, like. To get the steel rim around the wooden wheel. If the rim was too tight, it crushed the timber, and if it was too loose, it fell off. It had to be exactly right, like. And the skill to do that was amazing, like. They had to have the rim hot, put it onto the timber, and then cool it, and it retracted onto the timber, and to be exactly right, they had stayed there, like. But anyway, that was the end of the forges. Obviously the cobbler died. He was gone. One of the 3 pubs was in the courthouse. Someone, O'Toole's, bought the courthouse and converted it into a pub. It closed. Then we had 2 pubs and 2 shops, including the post office. Then the lady in one of the pubs died, and that pub went. Then the man in the shop, well, one of the shops was burned down in the early 70s. John Burns' shop was on one corner, and Pat's post office was on the other, and Jim, the other brother, was in the pub, and then on the other corner, 4 brothers on the 4 corners. So the woman in the pub died. Then John's shop was burned, that closed. And then we had the post office, and then it closed. The people in it wanted to retire, and no one wanted to take it up, and it closed, and now the pub is gone. So, it's went, you could see it demising back over the years, like. And the school closed. They were brought then to Kiltegan. Someone was paid to bring him down in a car, like drive the people down, the kids down to. Again, the teacher retired. I remember it. The very latter years of it, in the sort of mid to late 60s. I remember we'd be going to Archaeological school, and I used to meet two Church of Ireland lads coming down meeting us, Hobson's over in Kilcarney, and they were going down to I said that was the last class that was going, and Mrs. Griffin then was the teacher, and she retired and the school closed. But we had two polling stations in the village that time. Two polling stations, like the amount of people that were around, and like the two polling stations were in the national school, but we had two polling stations, and the excitement at election time was unreal, like, because people were very involved in their politics. Like, you had the Fine Gael and the Fianna Fáil, and the man in the pub, Jim Byrne, was an expert at starting arguments, and there was very strong Fine Gael people around and very strong Fianna Fáil people, and to be in the pub, of course, and to be all out electioneering with the politicians. Godfrey Timmins would be out for Fine Gael, and he'd be going around all the houses, and the locals would be going with him, like, and they'd all have their badges. Then Podge Brennan would be up from Carnew and Fianna Fáil, and the Fianna Fáil lads would be going around with them, and then they'd all meet for drinks in juniors or gyms at the time, and there'd be fierce arguments, like. And the day of the elections, there'd be fellas driving, the drivers going out, getting people to bring him in to vote, and to be canvassing around at the polling stations, and fierce excitement, like. And sure, election happens now, and not thinking, unless you only were going to vote, you wouldn't know what's going on.
And do you have a favourite piece of local history that you could tell me about?
Well, I suppose the hall has always been special to us as a family, because it was built in commemoration of my uncle, like Seamus O'Toole, who was shot in 1922, like. So the hall has always been special to our family, and as long as I can remember, like, I've been sent to the hall to sweep it, clean it. No matter what was going on in the hall, you had to go, like. And I suppose, as I say, the hall would be special to us, like, for that reason. Like, the site where the hall is now, there was a church there in the 1800s. Well, it was only a thatched building, like. And Michael Dwyer would have made one of his, they said anyway, he made one of his escapes from there. He was at Mass one Sunday morning, and the yeoman arrived to arrest him, and the story goes that he hid under a woman's big skirt, and one of his comrades just ran down the hall field here, as we call it, ran up the hill, or ran wherever he ran, and the yeoman went after him, after this fellow who ran, and of course it wasn't Dwyer, and then Dwyer escaped. But it was burned down, and they had nowhere to say Mass for a while, so they said it, we were tools of the Sallies, it's just up the road from the hall, and they said Mass in our yard, like, just people congregate in the yard outside the house, like. So the Killamote Chapel was built then in latter times, but the hall fell into obviously disrepair, but some of the walls were still standing, and the lads just play handball in it. And the older people always referred to as the alley, the ball alley. They never called it the hall, even when the hall was built, like. So they always referred to it as the ball, because they would have played handball in it, like. So Jim was shot in December 22, and he had been active in the area before the trouble started, like. He would have been in his early 20s, like, and he would have been involved here playing football and involved in whatever was going on in the community, and they decided that they'd build a hall in his honour, and they started and they collected some money, and times were hard, and they'd collect a few pound, and all the work on it was voluntary, like. And they'd build a bit, and then they got as far as having the walls up, and a man from Dunlavin, who was friendly with the family or knew of Jim, come at home, and he said he'd give £100 to the hall to get it finished. So they got it finished, and it was the only hall in the area, in the country at the time, and used to have dances in it. It was a hive of activity like that time, because there was no hall in Kiltegan. That hall wasn't built for years after. There was no hall in Knockananna, and there was scarcely a hall in Hackettstown. And I suppose the talk of the hall had started before Jim went away. He was involved in the area, and there was huts, Nissan huts being sold from the Cool Money camp. The soldiers, English soldiers, were moving out, and there was huts being sold, and local communities were buying them for halls and this type of thing. And an article appeared in the Wicklow People that these Nissan huts were being sold, and that Ratangan a committee in Ratangan had bought one of these for a community hall. No, there was no, Hackettstown was buying one, but Ratangan wasn't. So Jim wrote a letter, and he said that the Ratangan people of Ratangan weren't dependent on British Army cast-offs, and if they ever built a hall, they would build it with native material by locals. So this sort of how the talk of the hall started. So anyway, he died, and then people around said, we'll build a hall in his honour. So it was opened in the late 20s. And as I say, at the time, it was brilliant, because up to that, people would have had house dances, like dances in people's houses. Now the houses were tiny, and how they ever danced in them, because people used to talk about the house dances in various houses and the crowds that were at them, but the little house wouldn't be much bigger than half this house, or less than maybe the kitchen, but they would all congregate, of course, and whatever they did, they'd smoke and drink and all that. But the hall was a huge advancement, and people still, you'd meet people and they'd tell you about being at dances in Ratangan 70 years ago, on bikes. The bikes would be lined up. Well, there were only ditches at the time. The statue hadn't even been built that time. It was just, that was on our land, the O'Toole's land, and my father donated the site for it. But there would have been hundreds of bicycles, people. But I say, it's an amazing amount of people you would meet, and oh God, I was at her dancing or thing 70 years ago, And our yard was very close to it. And my father used to always tell about going out after a dance, well, several times, and out into the hay shed, and there'd be bits of clothing light around, maybe the belt of a dress or the heel of a shoe or something, where they'd have wandered up the road into the hay shed. But anyway, that's a different story. But no, the hall, as I say, has been a permanent fixture since that. Then, of course, there was a very successful football team here in the 30s. And the 20s, they won a junior championship in the early 20s, and they won 2 senior football championships in 30 and 36. But the hall was a constant all the time. There was a Marian Arts Association here in the 50s, I suppose. There was a national movement, and it was set up to promote drama and all that. And there was a very successful group here at that time, going back to the plays, they would have performed several plays. My father and people of his time would have been in it. We would have done several plays, and it ran for a period of maybe 10 years or something like that. But again, it revolved around the hall. Then before the Machran Tuha, Machran Ferma was very active here in the 60s, and they were a very successful group. They won an All-Ireland debating competition. Debating in particular was huge with Machran and Ferma, and question times and all that type of stuff. And they did drama as well. But again, it revolved around the hall. Now, there's the people who won that debating competition are still around, thanks be to God. But it was a huge thing at the time, to win an All-Ireland debating competition. But they were very good, and it was fairly taxing, like, because you got a topic and it could be anything, and you had to either propose it or oppose it. Like, it didn't matter about your feelings or what you thought about it. Like, and there was 4 on the team. There was a chairman and 3 others. Like, so the chairman got up and he laid out his arguments, like, and then the other 3 got up and spoke, and then the others did the same. Then the chairman had to get up and pick holes in the other's argument. So you had to be thinking all the way, like. So it was tough, like, for ordinary people, but, like, you know, these were well able to debate, like, and it was tough, like, for the chairman to get up and have to pick holes in others' arguments, like, whether you agreed with him or didn't agree with him. But anyway, they were very good, and they did some drama as well. And then, as I said, the Mockery and Two had come then in the 70s after that. But there's been something sort of going on in the hall all the time. It got a bit run down, and that, like, there's been a lot of work done on it there in latter years, like, and there was a FOSS scheme there some years ago, and we put toilets. There was no toilets originally, like, and a 5-gallon drum in the ladies' toilet was the toilet, like, and we put toilets onto it, I suppose, in the 70s through a FOSS scheme. That time FOSS was, and then in latter times we dry lined it and, you know, put in a new floor and that type of stuff, you know, change the stage around. The Mockery and the Two nearly burnt it down when they were doing the painting. There was a big open fire in one end of the hall. I was at the back of the stage and of course we were all painting, and we lost paint and all sorts of paint, and the brushes had to be cleaned. Of course we had petrol, and we had the big fire open, burning stuff, like, and this petrol was being splashed around. Next thing, the petrol got light and it started, and only there was an adult there, a fella beholder than we were, who saw it and pulled out. We'd have burned it, but anyway, it escaped. But no, the hall has been central to everything, really, like, you know. Now it's small. We're planning at the moment to extend it now at this stage. It's going on for ages, but with usual we have problems with planning and all that type of stuff. But we are planning on extending it, and maybe put the pantry, if we could reorganise the pantry, put it at this end that you'd be looking out at the mountains there through glass wall. Maybe that's our plan at the moment, you know. But say we've been held up with we've problems with trustees. Obviously all the original trustees had died, so we had to get new trustees and all. It's a whole rigmarole. It's very slow, like, but we're still planning it anyway, whether we might get it done sometime.
And earlier you mentioned that there were people who would occasionally visit the house, and I think you said these spun a few yarns. I'm just interested, are there any kind of folk stories or other stories indeed about kind of rat dangling?
Well, I suppose mostly when you were kids, fellas to come in and to try and frighten you with ghost stories, like, and the banshee. Well, I don't know whether they believed them or, like, there was a family that said the banshee followed, like, that one of them died to hear the banshee, and there were families in Farbrega, Farbrega be heading towards Ockram, up in the hills. There was people there that had come from Knockpatrick over in Kildare, and they said when someone died that they saw a hearse and horses, like, and you saw always all the O'Tooles of that group are buried in Knockpatrick. It's just between Baltinass and Castledermot, and they'd say, oh, there's the Knockpatricks. So someone was going to die, to see the hearse in the sky or whatever, and say, oh, the Knockpatricks are coming. So they were coming for someone, like, someone was going to die, or maybe someone was sick and was going to die. But they believed firmly, like, there was a man up the road there, he believed firmly in fairies, like, and all that stuff. And he's obviously dead now, but whether he saw something or whether he didn't say, but, like, people believed in the pishrogs, like, you know, stealing someone's luck and all that. You put eggs in their hay and you stole their luck and all this type of stuff. And they believed in bad luck, you know, that all that type of pishrogs, and they did believe all that stuff. Well, maybe if they didn't believe, didn't disbelieve it, they wouldn't disrespect it, like, they wouldn't laugh at something happening, or just like the tales people tell, they wouldn't disrespect it, like, Whether they believed it firmly or not, it was hard to know. But I suppose at the time they would have been talking mostly about the football teams, like they'd be talking about the tough matches and the rows and all that, like, and there was a football field up the road there. There was a county final actually played in Rathangan up there, and the big rows, like there was always a row at the match, or it was part of the routine, like, and you know who hit who and who was good in a row and who wasn't, and the tough men on the team, and like they called the Rathangans the Barbers Rathangans, like, because well, they won 2 championships, and they were supposed to be hardy, all right, like, but were tough men anyway, like, and football wouldn't have been as stylish as it is now. They weren't athletes, like, so it was every man for himself, like, and they talk about the individual lads, how they were good, and there was one man up the road, he mightn't have been the best footballer, but he could never be knocked down. He was just so strong, no one could ever knock him down, like, and that type of thing. Then you had the stylish footballer, Johnny a Dream, like, was a great midfielder. Mikey the Master Byrne, he was a great midfielder, like. You see, we had A.R. Bryn, he was the teacher in school, and he, as I say, become president of the GA, but there was 3 or 4 of his family who played football, like, and they were all exceptional footballers, so they would have lived on the glories of the football, like, up until the time they died, and then someone had died, and was he on the 30 team or the 36 team, or, you know, as they went along, like, the older boys were gone, and the lads who were only youngsters on the team at the time, they were dying, like, so was he on the 36 team, where did he play, and the whole thing would start again, like, about some lad he hit, or some lad he hit him, or, you know, but I suppose country people judge the vibrancy of an area by how the football team is doing, like, and obviously 36 to 30s, 20s and 30s were a good time. Then the 40s, they went back to junior, and they struggled on until the late 60s, and they had a junior team here, but the college in Hyde Park was being built, and there was a lot of good footballers from other counties playing on it, inter-county footballers. There was fellas from Cavan and all over the place working in Hyde Park on the building, and they played on the last Rathangan team that played. They played in a county junior final against Forestry College. Like, the Forestry College was in Rathdrum, in Parnell's home place, but there was enough people down there to have a football team, like, and they were very strong, they were very good, and Forestry College beat them in the final, but it was the last football match or last team that played representing Rathangan, like. But there was an awful lot of outsiders on it, so again the emigration had hit, lads were gone, like, you know, there was an awful lot of fellas gone by then, so it just died that time.
And is that sporting culture still alive today in Rathangan?
Well, there was a club formed in Kiltegan back in the early 70s, and we all played with Kiltegan. Like, you wouldn't have enough for a team in Kiltegan and Rathangan, so our lads we all went down and played hurling and football with Kiltegan. And it was always a strong tradition, because, as I say, you had the president of the association, so I mean, he had an influence in the school and that, you know, and it was always, so I suppose, a source of pride. You were watching the All-Ireland final on black and white television, and the master was presenting the cup, like that was a huge thing to a child too, like, and the mistress sitting in the hard corner, like, and he'd be in school the next day, which, like, and I remember one time there was an interview done with him on television. I don't know what the programme was, but I mean, you were there watching, and the master was presenting the cup, like, to Sam Maguire, this mythical trophy, like, well, mythical mightn't be the right word, but this trophy is such importance, like, and he's handing it to the captain, like, so it was bound to influence people. It had to influence you, like. You sort of thought, well, anything was a bit possible, like, you know, if he, you know, because he was just a master to us, like, you were going in and you were going to get a few slaps the next day, and he'd be out in the playground with you doing a bit, or he used to have his garden, and he you learned a lot of gardening from him as well. We had a garden up there, and you'd be digging the garden, sowing potatoes and vegetables and all that, so you'd be doing that part of your lunchtime as well. But he was just a master to us until you saw him on the television, like presenting the cups. He was president in the early 60s. Actually, I think Galway won the 3 All-Irelands that he presented to. Yeah, you see, the school had a good name. Like Rathcoyle had a great name as a school, and people used to come to do the scholarship that time. You know, the county council scholarship was a scholarship in 6th class, and if you got that, then you got secondary education. Like. So Rathcoyle had a very good reputation. There was only a couple of places each year in the county, like. So you did a written exam, and if you did well enough, then you got a scholarship to go to secondary school, not Beg, or the girls went to Carlow or wherever. So Rathcoyle dominated the scholarships at that time, like, and people would have come from maybe Knockannana or Haggstown to try and pass the scholarship, like. It was a huge thing that time, and like a lot of people got scholarships and went teaching, and obviously teachers and that type, mostly teaching, I suppose. But it was a huge thing to get a scholarship, like, because people hadn't the price to send someone to secondary school, and it was massive, like. Now my brother won the scholarship and didn't take it up, and the master went mad, like, and the mistress went mad that he wouldn't take it up. He wanted to go farm. He stayed at home farming, like. But any the rest of them that God, they definitely took it up, like.
And how much would you consider yourself to be from the Wicklow Mountains? Does that hold any significance?
Ah, yeah, very much so, yeah. Like when I'm in Kildare and I'm looking around, there's no mountains, like. And you're sort of home and you see the mountains. When you're home back from anywhere and you can see Cadine, if you're coming from Dublin, like Cadine is the highest mountain there in West Wicklow. You see Cadine and you see Finn McCool's image and the child on the face of Cadine. You know you're home then, like. There's 2 marks on the face of Cadine, and they say it's where Finn McCool and his child lay one night, like. But there's a shape there. I don't know what made the shape, but this is the story, like. So when you're coming back and you can see Finn and the child, you know you're home, like. Or well, obviously if you're coming the other way, you're all hills. But when you're coming into West Wicklow, like, and coming from Carlow, like, and the windmills now were a great marker. You can see the windmills outside Knockannana there. But yeah, you couldn't, like, when you're see flat ground, you're not at home, like. You have to be able to see the hills.
And what does it mean then for you to be from an upland area?
I don't know. I suppose it's, you know, to climb the hill there, and just when I go up on the front of Carnon there, I go up to Carnon and I look down, I can see everything everywhere I was as a child. Like, I can see the national school, I can see the village, I can see where I'm living, I can see where I was born, I can see Hacketstown where I went to secondary school, and I can't see Tullow. But like when I go up there and you sit down and you just look. Everything is, your whole life has been here, like, except for a few years when I was away. But like when you go up and look down from Carnon, your whole life is there in front of you, like. Now to go up onto Lug, then Lug, a place like that, you love going up it, but like for me to go up Carnon or Carrick or Cadine, like here in the west, like everything I've seen and learned, you can see the football field in Kiltegan. You know, the chapel in Killamore, the college in Hyde Park, all your landmarks are there, like. So if you just go up and sit down and you can just check them out, that they're all there, like. And going back, like, years back to the 50s, there was houses there across Carnon, and people used to go up there on a Sunday to congregate. And the last man who lived up there was Jim of the Hill. Jim Byrne was his name. He was a stonemason, and he was the last man living in Carnon. And people used to go up to Jim of the Hills every Sunday during the summer, and it was a gorgeous place. Like, the sun shone in onto there. The sun always hits the front of Carnon. If it shines at all, it shines into Carnon there. And people just, now Jim's was only a stone cabin, like just a stone house. You wouldn't be inside drinking tea or anything, or they might bring tea out maybe, but it was only a little stone house, like. And people would go up there and congregate, and it was the very same. They'd look around the place and they'd say, just Gerald Toole has pitched the hay, Jim Toole hasn't mowed yet, Brendan Whelan's having done something else, and we're able to see the whole area and who was doing what, like, or whose barley was ripened, or where they had sowed the turnips this year, or had the potatoes blossomed. So, and that's what they went up for there, like. And it surveyed the whole area, like you'd see every field in the place, like where they had the cattle and where the sheep was, and had to put the sheep to the hill, or, you know. So the whole thing was discussed up at Jim at the Hills. Now Jim got old and got blind, and he was the last of his family, and my brother brought him down, and he brought, there's a little house down there, and he brought Jim down there, but he was an old blind man, and he had nothing to bring, like he had only a lump hammer and a chisel and what he stood in, and a couple of pots, like. And he come down there, and he said down there was terrible lonely, down, which was effectively in the village, but he couldn't see what he could see all his lifetime, like when Jim went out his front door, he was looking down the whole country, like, and he'd see lads that time working in the field, so he never was lonely, like, because he'd all look out, and he'd that time fellas would be always in the fields, like. And when he come down here, he couldn't get over the loneliness of it, because he couldn't see out. I know his sight was failing anyway, but like he never adjusted to living down here, like. So the hills, like, as I say, when you go up the hills, you can see all your past, really, where you've been, where you went to school, where you did this, where you did the fields you've got up to mischief in, the houses you might have robbed the orchard in, or whatever, like, you know, your whole thing is there in front of you, and you can see that all there from the top of Cornwall, like. And the other thing about the hills was putting the stock up, putting the sheep up. You could the seasons followed the sheep. You shored the sheep, and you were putting them up to the hill. The summer was coming, you were looking forward to the holidays. They were great times. Then you'd be up during the year herding them on the hill, see were they all right, and then you were bringing them down in the autumn to get them ready for sale and sorting them out. So the seasons followed what you were doing with the stock going to the hill. And it was the same with people passing through the village. Like the farmers around here always put stock up into Kildare and onto Goodland for the summer, and the people in Kildare called the sheepmen the Agora men. Whether it was after the town's land of Rathgora up there or what, but they called everyone who went up around Kildare and the better lands onto the Curragh and in around Kilcullen and all that area. The fellas brought the sheep to there, like, for the summer graze, and they were called the Agora men. And you could regulate the season of the year with the lads passing through the village. The bonus scales would be coming down again, going to look at the sheep, and they'd always stop and go in and buy something, or be in the pub or getting a few drinks. You could regulate the seasons of the year by what was going on with the hills, and putting stock up, bringing them down, going to look at them. Then fellas who had sheep in Farbreg again, that was right up at the foot of Lugnaquilla, they all congregated there for the shearings, and be thousands and thousands of sheep being shorn there, maybe over a period of a week, and the wool being sorted. And the excitement was always excitement about wool, because it was obviously money, and at the time wool was great money. I remember wool being 50 pence a pound, and if it went to 70 it was great. But the farmers loved the wool money because you weren't losing stock. You still had your stock, you didn't have to sell a beast to get the money. The wool was brilliant, and there was always excitement around wool and how much the wool was going to be, and was it going to be up or down and all this. And of course China was buying at that time, and it was a great market. Now wool is not worth giving. You can't give wool away at the moment. It's just useless, and if you can get someone to take it, you're lucky. But that time a lorry would come to the village in Ratangan, a buyer would come, and everyone would come with their packs, and of course spirits were high. But you could regulate. The year sort of progressed by doing something on the hill, either putting the sheep up, going up to look at them, bring them down, and you met all the sheepmen. You went up on the hill, there'd always be other fellas there looking at sheep and all. But it was, the hills were vital to fellas with sheep and with stock.
And even when you were younger, do you remember seeing any particular wildlife, or was there any elements of the habitat that maybe aren't the same now?
Well, you had the corncrake and all the birds that are gone now. It's like Um, as I say, there's no use if you want to see foxes or badgers. The only thing that are up around the hills now are deer, and they are causing the problems with farms around it too. Like, so the only thing that's sort of thriving around the hills are deer, and obviously they have to cull so many deer every year. They're just getting that plentiful. They're getting out of control too, and the farms joining the forestry are being plagued, and they're blaming the deer now for spreading TB. So it's hard to know.
And would you have a favourite maybe ancient site or archaeological site within the kind of broader area of the Wicklow Mountains?
I suppose Michael Dwyer's cottage is a favourite of anyone around this area, because the story is so real, like, and just like him escaping from the hall in Rathangan, or where he surrendered, where he surrendered to Hume is just down the road there. He was promised that he'd be sent to America, and of course he never kept a promise and sent him to Australia. But his gun was in Humewood, and in 1938 there was a commemoration at Dwyer's cottage, and Madam Weygant gave a loan of the gun for the commemoration, and there's a photograph in the book of my father and two locals with Dwyer's gun. Now it's in the museum now, but like, it was real. They had his gun like up at the cottage in 38, so it was very real for them, like. And McAllister, and this whole story about McAllister being shot above at the little cottage where he made an escape, and the statue in Baltinglass and his grave is in Kilranna. And anyone that goes to Australia has to go to see the Dwyer Monument. I was there myself, lucky enough. I went twice, and such a monument, like, and all the patriots' names are on it. But like, it started with Dwyer, like, they brought Dwyer and the wife there first. He had been buried in the suburb of Sydney, but they put money together to bring him and put him there, like, looking down on Bondi Beach, like, it's just off Bondi Beach, and it's to stand there, like, and Dwyer's name there on that, like, and you're only down the road from where he had his escapades, like, and like, the military road is so real, and the barracks and all that, like, it was all done to capture Dwyer, like, they started the military road and building the barracks, and he had so much support that he could stay on the run and have safe houses. And even though people were burned and their houses were burned because they were keeping them and all that, like, but they couldn't capture him, like, he had to give up. And like, again, and he has faded into history, like, you don't see, like, there was a book written about him there by a nephew or grandnephew of some relative of his, but like, you never hear Dwyer's name mentioned in history books. Like, you don't hear him mentioned anywhere. Like, if you were talking about Michael Dwyer outside of West Wicklow, people would know who you were talking about. Like, now, maybe he wasn't as important in history as we think he is, but he was important here and to us, like, and the fact that he caused the English so much heartache, and the fact that they couldn't get him, like. Now, you probably would have liked him not to surrender, but he had a young family and he probably was just tired, like, you just can't leave him like that. When he had a wife and family, well, that sort of decides things for most people, doesn't it? But like, the stone where he surrendered is there on the road as you go down to head down towards Baltinglass, and we have found it. It had got overgrown, but we have found it, and we're going to do something with it now to put something on it, or to resurrect it, like, before it's forgotten altogether again. Because again, another few years it's like the milestones. We're trying to find the milestones. There's milestones every mile and directions on them and all. So we have, during the summer there now, some of the lads have found some of the milestones, and we have found the stone where he surrendered to Hume. It was outside Humewood estate. He wouldn't surrender to him on their ground. He made Hume come out. It was a small victory maybe, but he made him come outside his estate to accept his surrender, and he's going like, and he was promised that he'd be sent as a free man to America and his whole family, and of course they sent him to Australia, his wife, and I think about one of the kids, or two of the youngest, and by the time the older ones got out, he had died like. But again, just to keep his memory alive, like while the cottage is there, I suppose it's a big help. As I say, we're going to do a walk up there now sometime, but again, you go up there to the cottage and you try to imagine what it was like. They were inside in the cottage and the house burning, and the whole rim around of yeomen with the muskets loaded like on the house, and they're trying to cajole him to come out like. You only want to come out to shoot him like. He wasn't going to surrender. And the poem says, into this house we came unasked by those who own it, they cannot be to blame like. So he got the people who owned the house out like, let them out. And he led them to believe he might surrender if they were allowed out. So then he said, now your work it must commence. And the door was, of course, McAllister was wounded and he was definitely going to die. So he said, stand him up behind the door and open the door. And they opened the door, and of course they all shot McAllister, and Dwyer and the boys made their escape while they were reloading the muskets. So but again, it's just up the road like, and you stand up there at Dwyer's cottage and you're looking out and you can imagine like the roof is burning over your head like, and these boys are out there with the muskets pointed at the front door, or the only exit, and your options are fairly limited.
When we think of Dwyer's cottage and the milestones that you've kind of mentioned there, how would you describe the kind of current state of tourism, I suppose, in the Wicklow Mountains?
Well, as I said to you, tourism doesn't really exist in West Wicklow. Like, I'd say, if you come past Lara over the hills, like you leave tourism behind you. And I suppose it's some of the problem is that there isn't businesses here to profit from tourism. You know, if you start from Auckram, the first place you get a cup of tea or a drink is Baltinass. There's nowhere between Auckram, there's nowhere, or Glenmalure. If you leave Glenmalure, you have to get the Baltinass before you would get any refreshments or get any opportunity to spend money. So I suppose from that point of view, we see tourism on the east coast and about as far as Lara, and that's it. And like, you go down to Glendalough at the weekend, well, we would never dream of going to Glendalough at the weekend because of the traffic and all that. Like, we can go down, we're close, we can go down during the week and all that. But there is no real benefit to people in West Wicklow from tourism. Maybe Hollywood might get a bit because people might be heading across the gap, going up Wicklow Gap, and but Baltinglass wouldn't really benefit much from tourism. Blessington maybe, possibly, but see, people are more inclined to be passing through Blessington to get down somewhere to start a walk, like coming down maybe to Hollywood. It'd be the same in most places to pass through, and a busload of tourists will pass through a lot of places until they get to Glendalough. So you'll see tourists passing through, but to get them to stop and come in, like if someone has set out from Dublin, well, they're not going to stop in Blessington or Baltinass really. And I suppose we've benefits of being close to Dublin, and it's a disadvantage at times because, again, and walkers bring their own refreshments and bring their own tea, and they don't really stop. You know, they'll have the tea on the mountain, have their break, and then they come down and just want to change their clothes and go home, like, because they're probably damp or just tired, and they'll sort of head home. Like, you'd see the car park at Glenmalure Lodge packed, and you go into Glenmalure Lodge and there's nobody there. Like, they've parked the cars and gone for a walk, and they'll come back and they'll get into the car. Now they've started charging for parking down there recently, because for that reason, like, a genuine customer could come in and the car park is packed, like. But you would never pass the car park in Glenmalure, but there's a lot of cars there, like, but they're not inside in the hotel or in the restaurant, like.
And do you think that kind of day trip is hurting potential tourism in the Wicklow Mountains?
Hurting? Yeah, well, as I said, that's the way it is, you know, and that'll never change really. You know, people, when the hostels were open, you know, people used to come hosteling and they might stay around. But again, they're not big spenders. Like if someone is coming to hostel or to pitch a tent, they're going to do their own cooking and maybe have brought food with them. Like they're not going to spend it. They haven't got a lot of money maybe to spend. So they're not really going to go into Glenmalure and spend a lot of money on food. Like they're going to have their Primus stove or whatever way they're going to cook their own bits. Like so that it won't really change. Like, but it was someone made a point to me a number of years ago that there wasn't a hotel in Wicklow that could accommodate a busload of people. So now I don't know whether it's changed down in Wicklow now, but that's, well, maybe 20 years ago this man said it to me. I think he was involved in some committee or other. But he said there wasn't a hotel in Wicklow could accommodate a full busload of people. So they were staying in Dublin, up on the bus, down, do a trip around and gone like in a few hours. But that was one of the reasons, like there wasn't accommodation as such, like. So we're just, I suppose we were maybe spoiled that people were just coming down from Dublin and we didn't really bother about tourism. We weren't as dependent on it, say, as places like Kerry. Like we weren't really dependent on tourism. Like around here, there's no one doing B&B. There was a woman there a few years ago used to do it intermittently. The nearest now would be over towards Tinnahealy. But in this area here, no one has ever done B&B. I never remember B&B being done in this surrounding area, say from Baltinglass, Hackettstown, Ockram, Donard, like all that area. You wouldn't get a B&B. I'd say there is one now operating down towards Tinnahealy, which is on the Wicklow Way. But again, see, the Wicklow Way, I could never understand how the Wicklow Way went the way it did, that it ended up down in Carlow. Like the Wicklow Way could have come down through Attangan and back around through the Denby Mall and down to Hollywood. But like, it went linear. Like once you pass Ballatag down there, you bypass Tinnahealy, you go down by the Red Cow, but you bypass everywhere. Like, whereas if it come down through the village, through Knockanana, the village here, up through the Denby Mall, back to the Nard, down to Hollywood, that would have been a great lap. Like.
What role do you think that upland communities like Westlangan can play in maybe developing tourism in the area?
Well, see, it depends. If you don't have anywhere with facilities, it's very hard. Like, you need somewhere people can come and stay. The caravan park up in the Nard now, that's very popular. Well, it's these mobile vans, like, and they can charge and all that. But you need a facility like that. You need somewhere like that people will come and, you know, be able to do that, park up their van and stay a few days and that type of thing. But like, there is nowhere really like that. You need Clara Lara, I suppose, down in Rathrum is a facility. But again, you need something like that. Now, Joe Germain wanted to develop tourism there in Baltinglass, and he wouldn't get planning permission for it, like for developing these glamping. He wanted to put glamping tents or whatever they call them there in Baltinglass and develop it, but he couldn't get planning permission. Now I don't know what the technicalities of it were like, but again, that would have been, if it could have been possible to get off the ground, would have been somewhere where people would be coming, like, and those type of people might be out having a drink in the pub or get a meal or something like that. But you need the facility before people will come. Like, I was like the Knock airport, like people didn't go to Knock until the airport was there. You know, well, they went to Knock, but they flew to Knock when the airport was there. Like, but if you put in the facilities or the infrastructure, but that has to be first. Like, and as I say, if it's even the man up there, up above Newtown, has a track for quads and that's brilliant. Like, but and we've been there from here. That's the nearest place we could go with kids to ride a quad. Would be up between Newtown and Roundwood, like, and it's brilliant up on the side of the hill, and he has tracks around, and it's a brilliant facility. Like, but unless you have something that people want to come to, like, you know, we've no swimming pool in West Wicklow. Now they're talking about putting one in Blessing, and again, whether it's swimming pool, but like if you have an area that's covered and there's water and slides and stuff, kids will come like. But what would someone come to West Wicklow for, apart to look at the mountains and maybe do a walk? But they're not going to stay, they've nowhere to stay. Germain's is full at the moment. All accommodation is full now because of Ukraine. Like, so with the best will in the world, it would take a lot of investment. Like, and you see, most of us were living our lives, and tourism doesn't affect us one way or the other. Like, it's great to see people coming and people come and stop you and ask you something. I suppose one thing that could be developed would be heraldry, or people coming back chasing relatives. Like, there was a family here this year now. I met them up the road there from Wisconsin, who were tracing their relatives back to Bally, knocking up the road there. And every year there would be people like that coming back, like, trying to find relatives. And again, the amount of people left who can tell them where to go is getting very limited. Like, there's only a couple now who if I didn't know it, I would ask my brother or another man called Pat or Cullen, and they would have a very great knowledge of the area. But in a few years, like, it'll be pointless them coming back. But that would be the biggest thing. But again, those people landed. There's 2 car loads of them, and there was maybe 12 of them, and nowhere for them to get a cup of tea. And they had been here before, and the pub had been open. They couldn't believe the pub was closed. Like. So again, you had 12 people there, 2 car loads of the one family or extended family, and they were staying in Powers Court, and they were going to Mayo the next day. So they come to Rathangan, they couldn't spend sixpence, and they would have been willing and would have loved to have gone in and got a drink, and the pint of Guinness and the rural pub and all that. Like, they would have loved it. And I showed them around, and they stayed a couple of hours, sold them 2 books. That was the only money they could spend, like, selling them 2 history books. So, like, if you're off the Wicklow Way, people be walking the Wicklow Way and that, but again, it doesn't come near here.
And if you could pick one site to showcase from Rathangan to a group of tourists, what would it be?
Well, it'd be Humewood. Like, it's a beautiful building, beautiful site. Everything about it is beautiful. Like, you're down there and you're looking up at the hill there, Cadian and all. Like, it's a jewel.
What about one of the trails, or?
Well, the nicest trail around here, well, it's not a trail, but would be to go up Cornan Road there. We did it a few years ago as part of the history group, and go up Cornan, and you can go all across the face of the hills there, go across into Mugduff and down Mugduff Lane and back up the road here. We did that there one summer. It was the most beautiful day come the whole year. And we walked up by, it's the man I was talking, Jim in the Hills. We just went up to the top of Cornan and then come back down. And there is an old roadway. That was the thoroughfare at the time across the face of the hills for an ass and car. Like, there is a little road there, or a little, and there's houses up there still where people moved out of, and sites. And there was a family up there called Brophies, and they were at the beginning of the Ribbon Men. The Ribbon Men were agitating for better conditions for farmers and all that, and he was very strong with the reduced wear of white ribbon. I suppose they were the start of the farmers associations. But anyway, there were several families lived up there across the hills, and their places are still there. Like, you can see the little farmyards and where they pitched the ricks and all that. And we'll say Brophies was the most famous man, but they all emigrate. Like, but that's a beautiful walk, you know, and it's there. We're looking up at it there every day. Like, but again, it's not open. It hasn't been developed. The farmers haven't allowed us, you know, to. A local would probably go up, but they don't want groups of people. Like, you'd have to ask him and say, like, we have a group, can we bring a few there, whoever they like. But or even to go up Cadine, like, you can't see Cadine today. There's at the back of Carrick, but Cadine's a lovely walk. That would be the most favourite walk around here because it is open. Like, you can drive up towards the Denevy Mall, park the car, and go across Slieve Ray and up Cadine, like, and you see all into West Wicklow and out towards Dublin and all. Like, they would be Cadine would be the favourite walk here because it is open. Like, during COVID, there was hundreds and hundreds of people on Cadine every day of the week. You could hardly get parking up there. And but Cadine now would be our favourite. Then after that would be Lug, but like Lug is a bit more strenuous than that. And if you want a quiet walk, most of the time Cadine, like, you go on Lug, you're always, well, you know what Lug is. But Cadine would be the locals' favourite walk here because you can't do the one across Cornan and Mugduff, like.
And what challenges do you think the area of Rathangan or the broader community here might face in the kind of short or long term future?
Challenges? Holding on to people, as always, I suppose. People, they go to secondary school, they're gone to university, and generally that's the end of it. Like, we were at a GA meeting one time a few years ago, and this was the sort of question, like, what can clubs do, you know, for membership and all that. And some lad said the biggest scourge of the country club was education. And so how could that be? Like, he says, sure, so they go to secondary school, maybe go away to secondary school at 12, they're in university and they're gone. For a fella, if he was doing now an apprenticeship or trying to get a job, you see, there is no jobs. Like, years ago, a fella got a job with a farmer, but sure, farmers don't employ people anymore. They can't employ you. The contractor comes in and wipes the work out in a day, whether silage cutting or slurry spreading or whatever it is. Like, so machinery's gone so big and fast, farmers don't employ people. There used to be a garage here, closed down. Like, people aren't interested really in apprenticeships, so everybody has to go to college. Now, it could be Waterford, it could be Sligo, it could be Galway, UCD, wherever, but like, every child or every teenager in Leaving Cert aspires to go on away to college, and once they go to college, it's very hard to get them back. Like, now, as I say, well, we went as trainees to P&T that time, and we were away for a few years, but we always wanted to come back. But you see, it's getting harder now for people to travel to Dublin, like, the expense of it. Now, the only thing that might save it would be people working from home. That could, if that develops, that could be a big help, because they won't have to travel, and they can't afford accommodation in Dublin, but it will drive up the price of houses in the likes of here. But that's the payoff, like. But if people continue to work a lot from home, if that continues to be allowed, that could be a big help. Because obviously, there's a girl across the road there now, and she works in City West, but since COVID she can work from home, or 3 days a week, or that type of thing, like. So that could help in a big way. Now, it'll drive up the price of property. So you can't, you know, you'll win on one side. The local won't be able to buy the house, and then an awful problem here is planning permission as well. Like a fella could have a farm, a land there, and hoops they'd have to go through to get planning permission. Like, it's brutal. Like, but that's a different issue, and there's probably good reasons for that too. But to the fella that's getting hardship and paying 30 or 40,000 before his planning permission, it's not good. Like, but the working from home could be a big help.
And just in closing, then, what does it mean to you to be from and living in Rathangan?
Well, I suppose we always say down here. Well, one of the reasons was, say, there was a lot of John Burns, or we say someone is of Ratangan, or of Cornwall, or of Killamot. It's John of Killamot, like, or Jack of Sleeve Ray, or so you were of the place. We don't, like, I consider myself of it. You're not from it, like. It's in you. It's what you are. It's what made you what you are, like. And I think the of is an old word, like, and people understood what it meant to be of a place. It was more than being from it. Like, anyone can be from Ratangan. Like, someone can move in 2 years ago and be from Ratangan, like, or you can be from the company, you can be from the bank, or you can be from everywhere. But to be of a place is different, like. And I think that's the distinction between being from somewhere and being of it. And all the people around here years ago, as I say, some of it was said there was a whole heap of John Burns. There was John of the Shop, there was Jack of Blackrock, there was John the Dream, there was John of Coney, Jack of Sleeve Ray, but they were of the place, like. So that's the difference.
And what does it mean for you to be Michael O'Toole of Ratangan?
Well, it's the identity of it. Like, our house, we were tools of the Sallies, like. And I suppose on account of Jim, the Sallies was a sort of a famous place. Now, it was only a small house, attached house, and a small farm. But the Sallies was a famous place because of him, I'd say. And, like, I couldn't envisage, like, as I say, when I was deciding to get married and settle down, like, I couldn't imagine living anywhere else, like. I said, you did the flat thing in Dublin and the rented accommodation and all that, but, like, I used to go to Dublin with 2 shirts and a towel, and that's all I ever needed in Dublin, like. I never bought anything to put into a flat or a house in Dublin, and you put the 2 shirts and a towel, or maybe 2 towels, in the bag on a Monday morning or a Sunday night, and that's all you needed, because I knew I'd be home Tuesday night for training football. I'd be back home Friday night for the weekends, like. So I never considered living anywhere else. I had to live up there for a while, like, but it was only a means to an end to make enough money to come back and build a house on the home place. This is our home place, like. So you never consider, and I do have this argument here. I cannot understand how people emigrate. I just can't understand that. I have a daughter in Australia at the moment, and she has been there for years, and she's coming home now again. And I've been in Australia 3 or 4 times, like, or 3 times, and you land in Australia and you say, Jesus, what would anyone want to be here for, like? I mean, I'm only going because I'm going to see my daughter, like. But how someone emigrates to somewhere like Australia and settles down in it, now I can't understand that. And Margaret here says, everybody can't be like you, like. No one will go anywhere. But I don't mind anyone going for 2-3 years, tour the world, do what you like. But, like, I cannot understand that. That you're on the far side of the world and something happens here and you're not part of it, like. And if it's only a field day or something going on in the hall, like, or, well, obviously when people die, that's a whole different scenario, like. But to be in Australia, in Sydney, and something is going on in Ratangan, like, and you can only look at it on the phone or get photographs of it or something like that, I can't understand that. Now, as I say, that's just me, and it's not a good thing. Like, people have to travel, and people have travelled all over the world, but I think there must be an awful loneliness in it. And it's just like, it goes back to the people going back in the 60s. England is great, but it's not home.
Oh, that's great. Thanks so much, Michael. And I'll just stop the recording now.